Hi. If we want to communicate with a router, so then it is very important to know that a router how it works in a local area system. So basically, that we all know that our all communication is comes from ISP service provider. So in every country there is a few of ISP service provider. Like as that, if I am talking about my own country, Bangladesh, so we have a few renewable ISP service provider. Here is the one of ISP service provider is Amra Network. So they provide the ISP IoT services. So a ISP provider, they know they know that they has a large number of well customers. So those customers and client, they will have to access internet communication from their institute. So with this purpose, so the ISP service provider, they provide a internet connection, a service line to our home. If we at our home, if we have our router or broadband communication, then our router and broadband communication, they has a connection from a ISP service provider. Okay, so about the ISP service provider, I have to tell everyone that a ISP service provider, they have a uh, large number of uh, large number of public IP address, and those public IP addresses are always reserved for ISP service provider customers. Okay, so for example, that if you have a broadband installation at your home, or if uh, you have a router at your home, so that's mean that that broadband installation, with that broadband installation or with that router, so you have a ISP service connection from your router to ISP service institution. Okay, so I told you before that a ISP service provider has a fixed number of reserved public IP. Okay, so uh, so uh, so I told you that a router has a connection with ISP service provider. So that's mean that the the router or the broadband installation is also a customer for any of ISP service provider. So the ISP service provider, they will reserve a public IP to a particular router. Okay, so from this point, we know that our router has a public IP, and this public IP is coming from ISP service provider. Okay, okay. So on the other hand, we know that every networking devices, they has their media access control address. Okay, which is known as MAC address. So from this situation, we know that our router or our broadband networking devices has two addresses. The one address is public IP address. This public IP address comes from ISP service provider, and the other address is, it is a MAC address. Okay, so every networking devices, they have their MAC address. Okay, so when we install a broadband setup at our home, or when we install a router at our home, so that's mean that that broadband setup or the router need to be communicate few other devices. Okay, so in my scenario, so you are able to see that I put in here few networking devices like a laptop and like a mobile. So one is communicating with my broadband installation or router with wired, and another is mobile phone, that is that has a wireless communication, like as infrared or Wi-Fi system. Okay, Wi-Fi system. So a router known it very well that it need to be communicate with few networking devices like a laptop, computer, or mobile phone, or it might be any other devices. Okay, so how it is possible to communicate networking devices, networking devices to router, how it is possible to communicate. So the router has also a reserved private IP addresses for its own local area networking devices. Okay, like is that I put here an example on my scenario that router reserve private IP address for local network. Like as if I am telling you for an example that 192.168.0.02, 255, 255, and 255. So this is an example what I am telling you that this is a uh, example. So this range of IP address is reserved by our broadband. Okay, so this is a similar thing like as our ISP provider. Okay, so our networking devices will get those IP address, their IP address from router or broadband. Okay, so which IP address I am talking about this is, it's called private IP address, because at my home, my all networking devices like as computer, laptop, or mobile phone, they are working with their private IP. Okay, so they are working with their private IP, and they are always communicate our router or broadband. Okay, so for this reason, router has its own third identity, and its third identity is its own. It has also its own private IP. Okay, so if I am telling you that a router has a reserved private IP address like as 192.168.0.02, 255.255.255.255. So it's mean that router has also a private IP, and it will take its first private IP from its reserved IP addresses. Okay, so in this point, the router will get the first IP address, which one is like as 192.168.0.1. And after this private IP address, router will distribute its other addresses to its other local area networking devices. Okay, so from on my scenario, I can tell you that a networking devices, a router, for a router or broadband setup, it has its three addresses. The one is public IP address, the second is MAC address, and the third is private IP. So the private IP, why it is taking its private IP? Because a router need to be communicate its all local area networking devices like a mobile phone, like a laptop. So a router needs it private IP. Okay, and if I am talking about our all other networking devices like as laptop or like as wireless mobile, so it has its another IP address. So we all know that we have a MAC address, we have a private IP address for our local area networking devices like as laptop or mobile phone. But we have another address. It's called local host. Okay, So this local host has no value, just only for users like it's a self-mind or self-thinking type of this works. Okay, so 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 if I'm talking about how our routers works on, so our router has three addresses. One is public, which one is gets from ISP service provider, and the second address is MAC address. All our networking devices has the MAC address, which one we can't change, but we can change by use few more. We can change the MAC address by use few of our tool and technique methodology. Okay, I will share with you about this later. And the third address is private IP address, and this private IP address is used for communicate all local area networking. Okay, so and what's about our local area networking devices? So our local area networking devices has its MAC address also, because they are networking devices, and they has their private IP to communicate router, and it has another address. It's called is um, local host. Okay, so those type of address are uh, included our networking devices. So our router gets its public IP from ISP, and routers need a public IP to communicate ISP, because when I will search something on YouTube, or when I will send a mail to my friends, so that time I will use my private IP to my router. Okay, and router will get that request by its own private IP. So when I'm sending a message to my friend, so that time this router will take service for its works, for its just now request from customers by using their private IP, and its need help from ISP service to get that result. Okay, but ISP has no private IP, because ISP always working with public IP. So that's the only one reason that router has a public IP to communicate ISP service provider. So like this way, actually our all communication established through a router, through a broadband setup.